Hi, so I'm here to talk about a few new features I've added to MegaSplat. Um, so let's just jump in and get started. So the first one I want to talk about is a detail noise option. So this actually shipped in the last patch, but I haven't shown it in the video. And what this is a small detail texture that tiles inside of your main texture. And so that's, traditional detail mapping. But the old detail mapping mode, which is still available, actually had a different detail map for every texture. So that meant it ate one of your splat mapping channels and required a big texture array and all that stuff. So that's a little overkill. People might still want that, so it's still around. But the new mode, all you have to do is come in here and find the option for detail noise texture and turn it on. And if you look, the detail noise texture just takes a single texture with a scale, strength, and fade distance. So this texture has one channel. Basically, it has a normal map in the red and green channel, and then in the blue channel, there's just a noise to affect the albedo. So if I was to turn this off, you will start to get an idea of how blurry this scene can look. Let me just see if I can get my camera close enough without clipping. So this is, I'm really in close, and let me just turn this off. If I turn this off now, it will recompile the shader. And there we go. So here's what my texture res looks like without this feature enabled. But with it, it sort of brings in a lot of noise and prevents you from seeing blurry textures, which is really nice. Now, you only get one detail map for the whole terrain or whole material, but I find that's generally okay because you were just talking about adding noise when you're extremely close, and usually you can find one noise texture that sort of just works for everything. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is puddles. So there are two modes for puddles. Again, this is a shader compile option. There's puddles and then there's puddles flow. So puddles is the cheapest of the options. What it does is allow you to paint puddles onto the terrain, and you'll just get sort of a static puddle in the area where you paint. And puddles flow allows for them to be animated. So the nice thing about the regular puddles mode is that it doesn't take any texture samples to do this. So it's very, very cheap and much cheaper alternative to traditional flow mapping. And the same thing's true actually of puddles flow. So the puddles flow technique only takes two texture samples. This is much better than using the full-on flow mapping, and for certain types of effects it actually can look way better. The thing this is really good for is basically doing small details where you get interaction with the terrain, and where the interaction with the terrain is the most important thing. So to paint into these, what we have to do is switch to the painting tab in the Vertex toolset and then paint onto the UV3Y channel. So this. I don't talk too much about the paint tab in the MegaSplat videos, but this lets you access all the raw data, paint values in. It's very, very useful. And for a lot of the sort of esoteric features like this, it's not really worth creating some custom brush that all it does is exactly what this would do. So if we paint a value of, let's say, 0.2 into here, we can start bringing in puddles. You'll notice because I have displacement on, it's actually displacing the terrain down a little bit. This is so that, the other option would be it displacing up to the minimum puddle amount, but that kind of looks funny because then suddenly your puddle area is higher, and usually your puddle area is lower. And so what you'll see is that I have a little bit of a normal map on here that's flow mapped, and that's from the flow mapping. But then I can actually go into the flow tab, set my target to UV2XY, and then I can actually paint the direction I want the water to move in, just like I do with the other flow mapping. So you get a lot of the advantages of flow mapping, but it's more on a global scale, which if you're doing like caves and interesting little details on the ground, that can be really, really useful. And again, it's very cheap. So for the other feature I want to show, I'm going to switch over to a different scene here, which is the regular old mesh scene without the tessellation. So we come into this scene. This is the mode a lot of people use. Tessellation is very expensive. If you're going to ship that in a game, you have to be very careful with it because it can chew up a lot of cycles and raise your high end. So this is actually the mode that I think most people end up using. Um, and I've added some special modes to this shader. It works in the tessellation one as well. But basically, if you go to your lighting mode, you can change it from standard PBR to ramp. And the other new option is that in your texture packing mode, there's actually options for not having a specular texture or normal. So that's essentially just straight up diffuse shading. It's surprising how good it looks, so let me just turn this on. So now we've gotten rid of all of our normal maps and specular information, so the shader is incredibly cheap. It doesn't look nearly as good as it does with normals and stuff, but depending on what type of game you're creating, you still can get a very rich textural surface with this without any of those, normal or specular textures. And if you were going for more of a cartoony look, something, Borderlandsy or something like that, what you might use is this ramp mode. So what this does is get rid of all of the sort of standard PBR lighting that we use normally and uses a little ramp texture instead to define the lighting. So the nice thing about this is basically the parts that are unlit are at the very beginning of the texture, and then the parts that are lit are at the very top. So if you look at this actual texture, it is actually a 512 by 1 texture. It's a very, very small texture. So sampling into this texture is very fast, and we've just skipped all the lighting calculations that we would normally do. And so now we actually have like a pretty well-defined looking terrain that is incredibly cheap to run because we're only using one set of textures and that ramp texture. But we can actually turn on go back to the normal smooth AO, and we can actually use this ramping technique with normal maps and stuff as well. But if you were to change this ramp texture to, I have a couple ones in here that are sort of traditional lighting BDRFs, but you could actually create really wacky effects with this. I'm just going to select something that makes almost no sense, but so like if I select like this blue gear button, right, like I'm getting some really strange lighting because I'm looking up into this texture rather than looking up into my lighting texture. So you can also kind of use this as color correction or sort of, not really color correction, but sort of like a photorealistic rendering effects. And you could potentially even generate that little 1D texture and upload it every frame, and it would be a super, super cheap way of doing lighting. So yeah, I've done some other stuff, mainly around optimizations, things like that. Let me just check my list, see if there's anything else I wanted to talk about here. I fixed up some stuff with the brush windows, added some stuff for some third-party integrations that are coming to make it easier for those people to integrate with MegaSplat. So the brush thing here is basically this brush window now. The scroll is right here, which is something that several people asked for, and I kept meaning to do and not getting around to, just so that you can change your controls here and not have to. It used to bring all these controls down too, so you'd always have to go back up to the top to change the controls, which was really awkward. There's some other things I've been adding to the Vertex Painter recently, which is debugging information, so I can do things like draw the normals or the tangents on things. Just little things that have helped me debug various issues that people have come up with. And you can actually change this, the brush influence size, the size of the dot if you turn this on, so that when you, I gotta select the actual mesh, so you can have like bigger dots if you want that effect to show up. I can get silly with it and change their color and stuff like that. So anyway, hope you're enjoying MegaSplat. If you have ideas or things that you'd like to see added or problems, come to the forums. That's really the best place to reach me. I check it all the time. You can also reach me by email or YouTube comment, various other places. Yeah, thanks a lot.